Call the meeting to order. It's at 6 o'clock. All board members are present. First up is review and approval of the July 9th public meeting minutes.
Make a motion to approve the July 9th public meeting minutes.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion as presented, do so by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Good, I'm abstaining. Wasn't here. Okay. Our next meeting is August 13th at Canterbury Elementary School. First up is public communication and correspondence. We'll open it up for public comment. Just make sure you state your name, spell your last name, and the town that you're from, and limit comments to 3 to 5 minutes. Anyone like to speak? Yes.
I guess one thing I was confused about, I was at that meeting on July 9th, and I thought you guys were going to meet weekly to talk about the grading system.
So first, can you say your name?
Oh, sorry. I'm Catherine Martino.
From?
My daughter attends Belmont Middle School.
Okay.
Catherine with a K.
Yes. Kathryn. Martino with an O. So I guess I'm just a little confused why there's not more discussion happening when board members said that they were willing to meet weekly, and now it's like 3 weeks out.
So during public comment, we typically, I should have said this too,
Okay.
typically don't respond. I will say, as you
Okay.
can see from the agenda tonight, we are discussing multiple things. So the board at any time can always decide to add a meeting. I wasn't
Okay.
here July 9th, but just in general, could decide to add another meeting depending on the first reading for some of the handbooks or for tonight.
Okay.
Other comments?
Sharon Hampton, Belmont.
Sharon?
Hi. I just have a quick point of clarification regarding that. If the IKA policy was tabled, then why is it a second reading tonight?
So IKA was not tabled. When it's up for first reading, what we do is read and discuss, and then it goes to a second reading where it would be voted up or down, is how that works. So it was not tabled per my reading of the notes. So just to clarify that.
I just thought I saw that on the minutes of last meeting.
Any other? Okay, seeing none. New business is the Alma Preview.
So for this agenda item, Mr. Pope is going to pull up a screen shot of what you potentially see in Alma, just to give the board an understanding as to basically how it's laid out. Remember, this is a sort of preliminary layout. We're going to do the majority of this work in the fall. So if you need to move to see it.
I'm not sure if I can get it any bigger where it's a slide in a presentation mode, but so yeah, just jump in real quick.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Pope.
So this past probably 3 months or so of the school year, one of our teachers, Mrs. LeBlanc, was experimenting with Alma and some of the grades and things, what it would look like from a teacher perspective. And then that translated into what it would look like from a parent perspective. We were fortunate enough to have 2 students that were in her class that we also had staff in our school, so they were the guinea pigs that nothing was live or real or anything like that, but This is some real data that she collected throughout the school year that she was able to transfer over into Alma. And give some grades and just look at different features. So this isn't accurate information in terms of what the grades are, whether they got that score or not, but we were experimenting on the different features that it has. Because within Alma, you can, let's say a student turns in work late, you can put a comment in there that says late work, stuff like that. So what you see here, excuse me, again, I know it's a little hard to see from your seat, but on the side over here is where our standards would go. So this is actually what a parent would see when they pull up the parent portal in Alma. All the standards would go over here. We just put in, we didn't put in the full standards, we just put in some, what they would be about on the side here. So that language can change when we're ready to put our full standards in and things like that. But all the standards would go on the side here. All the assignments would go across the top. So the assignments would be broken up into formative and summative work. You can see the different colors, the blue and the yellow. And the teacher gets to choose colors for those. So as a student or teacher or parent, when you log in, you can see quickly whether it's a summative or a formative. So in this particular case, blue is summative, yellow is formative, and it just goes by date. In this particular case, she put in a lot of assignments on the same day. So you see a lot of 415s right here, but it would go chronological from here. So you would see by date, and obviously it would get bigger throughout the school year, for that particular standard. So work across the top. There's little, probably hard to see, but you can see a little dot right here. Those are comment boxes. So if a parent goes in, you can click on or hover over that comment box. This is a screenshot, so you can't do that here. So if a teacher put in a comment, saying, hey, great job, or hey, this needs some revision, or this was turned in late, whatever that might be, a teacher can put in that comment so a parent can see what that would look like on that particular piece, whether that's formative or summative. And then a quick scan across right here, like the check marks. So like as a parent, my kids have it in their district. I can see real quickly, like, oh, they're turning in a lot of their work. So green is good, green check marks are good, and then some type of other indicator that the teacher has to choose from is that either needs revision or was revised or turned in late. So there's different symbols for different things that communicate out how that student did. And then across, these are where the staff member enters the grades here. So they put in the grades across here, and then there's a mastery level grade right here. So the standards will all kind of average to a grade over here, and then there'll be an overall class grade. You can see it across the top. It'll be right here. They'll average in for all the standards piece. This particular case, you saw we put in habits of work. Habits of work do not count against the final average, so it's just the actual standards that are calculated here. So these two scores, you want to put in two standards. These two scores make up this 3.3 right here. And then you get anything that's less than proficient shows up like in an orange color. Anything that's proficient or higher shows up in a green color for you to see. Questions?
So one of the key pieces here, if there are some questions, some of the key pieces that we want to point out is that clearly this is going to be more user-friendly for families to be able to see the assignments as well as the scores. And that last column is so the average of the standard scores as well as the overall course grade. And you'll see that's to a 10, like a 3.3 or 3.4. And you'll see that aligns with those proposed grading scales that are in the handbooks. So this aligns closely with the handbook grading scales, as well as it's a much more user-friendly visually in general for families. And my understanding, talking with Mrs. LeBlanc and Mr. Pope, is very user-friendly for teachers as well.
So one of my questions, getting way ahead of myself, but you brought it up and it prompted me to think about it. If the board decides to follow through with the handbooks, next meeting or whatever, is it possible to put that key in here so it's easily accessible? Because parents aren't going to want to go back to the handbook to see did they get an A in here? Did they get a C in here? Like, I don't remember, what those numbers mean right now. It'd be nice to be able to put that kind of like a key or something like that in there somewhere so that it's easy to see.
I don't believe you could have the key in there. You could maybe set it as a file, like you can access the file. I'm not sure about that.
I guess I would just.
I'm not 100% sure on this piece. You might be able to set it up on the actual like progress report or report card.
Yeah.
Because so my kids have Alma in their district.
I mean, I'm not.
This is the parent view. So when they report out, I see something a little bit different. It looks like this, but it looks a little bit more formalized, like an actual progress report. And at the progress report, they have some things up there, like their attendance or some different charts. So we may be able to put something in there.
I mean, it's just one person's point of view, but it'd be nice somewhere in Alma to have that information readily available.
The other nice thing that we're talking about too is in Alma you have the ability to attach the proficiency scales to each of the standards. So as a student or a parent, you could go in there and see so if the standard is in nature or science, you could actually click on that and pull up what the actual proficiency scale is. You can get some more detail on that, which is nice.
I don't know if it's there, and maybe I just can't see it. So the blue and the yellow, the formative and the summative, is there a key that says what they are? So if
It
teachers...
says it actually right here. It says formative,
Okay.
formative, summative. Okay.
Thank you.
I don't think that there's an actual key box on it.
Consistency.
In terms of colors,
Users.
I'm sure. I know teachers can pick their own colors, but that would be something we'd have to talk about at the building. If we want yellow. I actually wanted to manage do blue and silver just because of our colors.
Okay. Other questions?
I don't know if it's related to this preview or not, but do we have a communication plan or a training plan for parents that will help them with first-time use of this?
Yeah, we're going to have to communicate just like we did with Empower as to how to access it and what it looks like and so forth. Right now, we've developed a professional development at the beginning of the school year for teachers specifically. And then once it's set up, we'll communicate out directly to families as to how to access. I mean, all families already have access to Alma, and the gradebook feature, as a parent, you can go in there and look at the gradebook. It's just a matter of explaining to families what that gradebook has in it and what it looks like.
And not to speak for the other buildings, but I'll put some information in my welcome back letter, just to kind of, hey, we're transitioning. It's important because some people don't have their Alma logins set up. They just haven't done it. They'll need to do that, and there's a process on how to do that.
We could do little videos too.
Mm-hmm.
That's the collective we. You all could do little videos for
Yes.
families.
So even from my blurred vision back here, this seems much easier to navigate and read
Yeah, it is.
than Empower.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah, it'll be a one-stop access for families
Right.
to go in. You'll see attendance, you'll see all the student information
Everything at
on
once.
your student. And if you have multiple students in the district, you can toggle between the different students
That's true.
on the one account.
So you may have touched on this already, but this is just one class. This is science, the blank. Whatever.
Yeah, so what you'll see, so as a parent, when you go in, you choose your student if you have multiple students in there, and then the dashboard will show you basically their schedule. And you click on the class, and then it goes into this view right here, and then you back out of it and go into a different class.
Okay, that was my question.
Yep, the progress report will have all of it on one, but it's obviously a different view.
Do we have the ability to kind of pull a progress report at any time, even though it's not final?
So
Just to look at everything all at once?
that's the beauty of how we do things. A progress report is just that. It's that snapshot in the moment in time. So with the expectation that we'll put out for teachers on how often they need to update things, that grade when you log on will be what it is at that moment in time. So that's the beauty of a program like this, because it's just live all the time.
So that last column is your progress report.
And then for all the classes.
Right, so she meant if she wanted to see all of her kids'
I don't know
grades
the
at
answer
once.
to that. I don't think so.
I don't believe so.
I don't think you can generate your own progress report, in one neat file. I'm not sure if that's exactly true, but I don't know that I was able to ever do that with my kids.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Pope?
Can I ask a question?
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's a question. I don't know
I
if
was
you're-
just wondering if you can view it on a cell phone.
Yes.
Okay, that was all. Sorry. I don't know the rules.
So next up are the student handbooks, and we'll go through them one by one. So the first, and this is a first reading, so just to remind everybody, it's a time for us to give feedback, give direction. We're not voting on them tonight. We only vote on things at the second reading. Okay, first up is BES.
I can just tell you, you want me to come up there?
Sure, why not?
Good chair, Mr. Hill.
I can just tell you briefly that Aaron and I did spend a couple of hours together, just trying to make sure that the PES and CS were consistent where they should be, as elementary schools in the same district. So some of the changes you'll see, I updated our co-curricular descriptions, just spelled them out a little bit in a little bit more detail because Canterbury already had that. I copied in a pet section from Canterbury we didn't have. We put some changes in there the nurses recommended to the language that they had in there previously. Updated our school cancellation to reflect current practices. But if you have questions or edits, fire away.
I have a question.
Yep.
How come the head lice prevention recommendations have been removed? Is head lice no longer a thing? Is that eradicated?
They follow a different procedure now, so they don't exclude kids from school anymore.
Okay.
So I think in general the nurses follow the guidelines from the Department of Health and Human Services. But they didn't want that in there anymore because it wasn't an accurate portrayal of what actually happens.
In looking at so I'm on, you don't have anything in front of you.
I have a paper.
The grading spot. It seems as though the description for 2.5 and 2 should be reversed. I see the word independently demonstrates, and that seems more of a 2.5 than a 2.
I think the difference is the 2 is referring to foundational content knowledge and understanding only. And so they independently demonstrate that foundational knowledge. The 2.5, they have that foundational knowledge, but they also have made partial progress towards proficiency, which would be a level 3.
So one of the things that we talked about in the policy meetings was actually the descriptions.
Yeah.
And this isn't just BES,
Yeah.
it's gonna apply to all of them,
Yeah.
because I know that these descriptions were pulled from the previous IKA policy. They're super broad. They're super broad. And they don't really, I know that they explain what those proficiency scale scores are, but it doesn't tell me as a parent who's not in an educational background what it means. So I feel like I kind of would want to see in those descriptions something about, what does that mean for their work completion? What does it mean for their preparedness, their engagement in class, their conduct in class, things like that. I didn't know if there was any way that we could maybe incorporate some of those into some of the descriptions for some of these. Again, I know that's something that we had talked about in the policy committees, but I just feel like these descriptions are super, super broad, and that is maybe part of the issue that people are having with.
Does that fall into habits of work that comes at later grade?
It might,
Does the elementary school do habits of work?
Yeah, and some of that stuff would fall into habits of work, so they get a separate score for that.
But is that?
Because it's not intended to impact their score on whether or not they've mastered a standard.
okay, because the habits of work, I don't see it in
It's not
either
in
one of them, so. I don't know if that is something that should be in here. Just kind of spitballing here.
No, I think that's,
Yeah, I mean, you just used the word, whether or not a student mastered a skill. That would be a great word to have in one of the descriptors. Probably a 3.
Yeah, proficiency is the word that is used.
Right.
And again, this isn't just BES, this actually applies to all of the ones that I've seen in here. I know where you guys are pulling that description from, but.
Yeah, and the detail around a standard really lies in the proficiency scale.
Yeah.
And so the good thing about Alma is you're going to be able to pull out that proficiency scale and actually see what it meant when they scored that standard. Because the learning targets will be right there for you.
but maybe we should say that. I don't know, yeah, I'm just, like, maybe we could put that in for K-4, like a description, like,
For a more detailed
well, because
description.
we don't even say, like, okay, what's a learning target? We don't define learning targets, standards, and competencies. Would that help?
It might,
And then for specifics, you could go to Alma. I'm just trying to work with verbiage so that.
So on the proficiency scale, on the proficiency scale, will all 4th grade teachers use the exact same scale, exact same verbiage?
Yeah, it's all linked to a standard, so there's a
Yep.
proficiency scale that defines all of these levels for a particular standard.
Yes, so somehow we have to direct people to that.
Right, so you could take that opportunity. Because I'm sure everyone's reading this. So direct to it, so.
I think that's a key point, is that, so this is going to be general, and then the conversation that the teacher is having with the parent around the specifics on the proficiency scale is the most important part of that conversation. So the details in the proficiency scale that will be communicated between the teacher and the parent.
Can we reference that in
Right,
here?
but
Just
why
like add
would
a
it
line
need
that says
just
detailed information?
reference?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I was
'Cause-
thinking,
or even for detailed information about your particular student,
Mhm.
And I can see some of the things you guys are talking about being in our letter or training to parents. How do you access the information that's going to give you what you're looking for? The frustrating thing is people don't read the handbooks, right?
Well, so I think that, when you start looking for stuff, you kind of go different places. So if we put it in a letter, we put a link to it in here, something that states, to go there, wherever we can communicate it out
Yeah.
for people to find it, because they're going to find stuff in different places. Some are going to read the handbooks, some are going to read the letter, some are going to go searching online. So as many places as we can get it out there, it's going to help us.
So the agenda covers up the page number, the bullet on the bottom. So it's on annual testing, so it's right below the proficiency scale.
Yeah.
So when it talks about formal assessment tools, DIBEL, STAR Early Literacy, IXL Diagnostics, Erin has in hers, you may want to look at that description, because I was like, should we spell all of this out? Because I was concerned about all the acronyms. That's my point. So if I were a parent, and I am, but if I'm looking like, okay, what does DIBELS mean? What does STAR mean? And I think the one from CES just gives a more general description of some of the things. So it's just a thought.
Yeah.
Maybe a definitions page.
Well, I'm just like, that's a lot of,
Yeah, no, I say that joke.
yeah. Just, I think, something to look at. And then, I'm on the bottom, it says annual testing, it's below the
Bottom of
grading
12,
K to
top of
4.
13.
It's immediately after the grading.
And then I had a piece on the homework section, which this would apply to CES too. It says, I don't know what page it is.
Oh, packet page.
Hold on.
It's on 25 in the BES handbook. I don't know what kind of pages. That's where homework starts.
32 in our packet. Thank you. So there's a piece in here that says, hold on. It says monitor, collect, and include it. It's under school staff responsibilities, letter C. Monitor, collect, and include it as at least 5% of the grade. And given that we don't give grades in that way, it should be in habits of work. I thought we should, I don't know what that means, actually.
It seems like it's outdated.
Do you mind if I jump in? We were cross-referencing the district policies, and this is right from the homework section in the district policy. But we did discuss that item as well because it seemed,
Well, it seems like we need to.
it didn't quite fit, but it's policy, so there it is.
Well, I think we need to update IKB, policy IKB. Because you referenced it, right? I think it should come out of the handbook. That's just my opinion.
I just pulled up the policy. It doesn't reference that 5%.
Maybe it's in
Which
the
policy?
procedures. IKB.
So remove letter C.
Yes.
I mean, you don't necessarily need to remove it, but maybe just a reference to the 5% of the grade.
Yeah.
I mean, because, monitor, collecting it, assessing it isn't necessarily a bad thing.
So you could do monitor and collect, monitor, collect and assess.
To stay on the homework section, I like how it's actually denoted, gave examples for, how long kids should be working on homework, grades 1, 2, 3, and 4. Moving forward to middle school, I think that piece was, it wasn't there. So I don't know if it's appropriate for middle school, but we can,
You can get to middle
we
school.
can hash that out. But
Yeah.
I liked what I saw there.
Yeah.
So instead of being critical on everything, give the props when we can.
I do think we have scenarios where families do not have the same opinion of homework as the school district does,
Correct.
right? If my kid is not doing homework, it stresses them out. That's happens, I assume.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know how we get around that.
We
Families
also have
decide.
scenarios of students that use their time in school to get it done so that they don't have homework to come home.
Well, can't use recess to get it done.
I don't know how they get it done.
We certainly have
find
teachers that provide time like morning arrival. At the time when some, kids might work on their reflex math if they haven't done it at home or something. So they do try to provide opportunities for students where they know they're not going to have the opportunity to do it at home. But, we're not going to, there's certainly different opinions.
In the school nurse section, will coordinate and perform appropriate health screenings. Can we maybe just add parent, 25?
It's 18 and
Not the ringtone I would have imagined. It's like a lullaby.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, could we add something like with parental consent or something, just so it doesn't look like we're giving screenings?
I wrote that out too, like, do we need consent for that, or?
I know we're always offered certain things when we have to
Right.
sign up, I just think it should be in there as well.
Yeah.
So it's not implying other things.
We do need to get parental consent.
Right, then we should put that in there, so that. Perfect. Anything else?
It's really small, but in the pet section,
I have that too.
it says pets may not be brought into the school building without permission unless allowed by the superintendent. Can we just take out unless allowed?
without permission, just say without permission of the superintendent?
Yeah.
We don't need a provision for service animals?
We actually have a policy.
Right, but we don't reference it.
And we cost pets too.
But that was allowed by the superintendent. Okay. And service animals would be allowed by the superintendent, since it's required under law. Okay.
Just move they.
Just want to make sure I understood, you said unless allowed, take out that ending.
We'll just.
Without permission by the superintendent. It's, I actually looked at the policy and I think that's how it's written in the policy, so.
I think that's in both Paul's, like CES as well.
I believe so.
Yeah, we'll make it consistent.
For the school nurse as well.
Anything else for BES? Okay. Next up is BMS.
On the second page, there's a highlighted list of some of the changes that correspond to the document. So just happy to answer anything you might have.
Can we make the fonts consistent throughout the document?
I will say, this is still a work in progress.
I know, but just a little note to self when it's, for some reason, different fonts drive me.
Yeah, same for me as well. Yeah, I'm in the process actually of kind of reformatting the entire handbook,
Okay.
just to make it look a little better. So it's not perfect yet. It'll be better for your second reading.
Okay.
So just a minor formatting thing real quick. Page 15, right at the top, you mentioned like 1 and 2, right? I would separate those out so they stand out a little bit, rather than being buried in the paragraph itself.
And what are you,
So-
page 15?
For mine, the top of 15 says to what extent a student is, sorry, actual handbook, page 15. Right?
Yeah.
So it says, formative assessments are generally regarded as having lower stakes and are meant to, 1, help students, like I would make that a new line, and make that stand out, and then put number 2 underneath it. You know what I mean? It's just a formatting thing, but it just feels like it's important, but it's buried in the overall paragraph. Might stand out a little bit more. Try not to get too anal about that stuff. That one seemed like it was important.
Yeah, the other thing that shifts too, like we're still adding names to staff, so the page, don't worry about page numbers, all that, because all that gets kind of messy.
So there's one, is that the parameters around teacher grading. So like in the high school we talked about later, they have some parameters around like when assignments need to be put into Alma for formative and summative, like basically teacher expectations, so that the parent is aware of when they would see that. And I didn't see that in here unless I missed it, which is possible.
There should be a piece that indicates that, by the end of the day, weekly, that they'll be updated.
What the next one? So page 16. Or 16 and that 59. Bars, right?
Well, but that's in reassessment.
That's reassessment.
It says grade reporting dates.
Oh, middle of 16. Yep.
Sorry.
And grade books will be updated at the end of each week of the school year or Handbooks. At the end
So
of
the
page
end, so
16.
that would include formative and summative?
Mhm.
I have a question on any assignment or assessment that does not give a student the opportunity to enter the 4 shall not be factored in when calculating the overall standard score, content, area, grade. So that's primarily the formative work, right?
It could be, that's primarily formative, right? Yeah, summatives will have 4s.
So that's a question I have for both BHS and BMS. Are formatives counting towards evidence of a summative?
They're part of the body of evidence, yes.
So one of my concerns is it's not clear in here for both handbooks to me what is counting towards the calculation of the standard grade. I'm just telling, so I know Matt has his hand up, so go ahead.
Well, that was actually part of a conversation that some of the high school folks had with an Alma rep, because we need to, all of this is in context of the fact that we now have a new grading system as well. So there's lots of different layers to trying to word this, and having conversations during the summer about implementation of Alma with our grading scale is, we're trying to figure out what it is that we are going to be able to do and how we can structure it. Conversation today around, how do we create an ongoing habits of work, GPA, so to speak, stuff like that. But what we have discussed, and it's not in here because again, this is new, trying to figure out how it could work, is that a formative assignment that can reach a 4, some of them won't, but if it has the opportunity to reach a 4, would be weighted at a 0.25. And all summatives that can get to a 4, and any summative can have a root to a 4, would be 1. So it's a formative that reaches or has the opportunity to reach a 4 would be weighted at 0.25, while any summative would be a 1. That doesn't equal, a particular 80% is going to be summative, 20% is going to be formative, because it's going to vary. How many formatives can have a 4? But a summative that's listed in Alma will have 4 times greater impact on the student's grade than a formative that had that root.
I guess and this is, I get that we're in process, but for both the middle and high school, if I'm looking at consistency, I'm unclear how many summatives and how many formatives minimum are required. Because I have had experience previously, like last year, that some teachers do one test or project, and that one summative is what the grade is on the standard, which is not, in my opinion and what I know, to be how you look at. And then there are some teachers who are looking at predominance of the evidence. So if I'm looking at consistency only, I'm concerned that we don't have some sort of parameters, so that if we're taking Mr. Pope's class and Mr. Tercey's class, Mr. Tercey gives 1 summative and 2 formatives, and Mr. Pope gives 3 summatives and 16 formatives. And I know there's not a formula, like I get it, I'm processing it out loud because that's what I do, but I'm concerned about consistency. So that's, I guess, something to take back, is how are we ensuring families know what the baseline expectation is.
I would be cautious with a conversation like that, because when you go to different content areas, math would be an example. You have a lot of things. Maybe a social studies, you don't have as many things because they're bigger, right? So you might have a lot more formative and/or summative assessments in a math class as opposed to maybe a different content area.
And I don't disagree with you. I'm just struggling with what is a minimum, because I don't think one test or one project should equal the student's grade. And I'm not saying you're saying that, I'm just saying that's what I'm struggling with.
Just to elaborate a little bit more, I'm picturing what you showed up there, and I'd be concerned about a class where, this class I'm showing progress, and I can check that they've done their assignments, I can check their grades. And then this class, it looks like the teacher hasn't entered anything because I don't see anything. Maybe that's by design because they don't have one assessment or whatever. But it is inconsistent and could be confusing for parents. On the other hand, I will admit, I remember forever ago when I was a kid, and the teachers that gave you one assignment and that was your grade. Like, that's not new. It's always been like that. So, I mean, I don't know how we fix that.
I don't think there really is a fix to that, quite honestly. So one of the goals here in putting that wording around basically grading expectations and when to put grades into Alma is going to give families as well as teachers and students an idea as to when grades will be upgraded. If we have a minimum number of formatives and a minimum number of summatives, in my opinion, it ties the teacher's hands to something that they potentially wouldn't be doing in their class, and requiring them to do something.
So the classes have syllabi?
Yes.
Is that in Alma? Will that syllabus be in Alma so parents would see it?
I think there's a file. There's a file for it. There's a file that you could.
Because that way, the parent could go in and say, oh, this is the expectations of the class. And then when I'm looking at the grades, I'm not surprised because they already read the expectations of the class.
I think what you're getting at, Michelle, is and I'll reference my own kids in middle school, is in the math class, going 2 months to the first progress report, and getting that progress report, and there being no information, in because the assessments haven't got in. And then very shortly after that, you may have a summative, and then that's when the wheels come off the wagon, with a poor achievement. Because some classes just it goes an exorbitant amount of time with nothing going in, nothing going in, nothing going in, and then all of a sudden it's wham.
And the difference with using Alma, though, we weren't able to put in formative work per se, like you would in Alma. You were able to put it in a little bit of a different way, pretty clunky, but real challenging for parents to see it. In Alma, you can put formative work in there much easier. So I think you're going to see that beginning of the year piece that you share that concern with be a little better.
Yeah. The assignments and the number of assignments are going to be much more visual to a parent and a student using Alma than it is in Power at this point, which is all assignments. So that's going to be beneficial.
In the reassessment procedures, number 5, it's page 16 in yours, says parents may be asked to sign the original assessment. Is there a reason why they may not be asked? Seems like if they're going to be reassessing, especially in grades 5 and 6, that they should be signing off saying my kid's being reassessed. So they're kind of included early on.
Yeah, I'm not sure that that's a consistent practice that, that's always a signature is required for reassessing. So I think just that flexibility for the teacher. We don't require them to get them signed.
I'm just thinking from the parent end, if my kids need to take it again, I would like to know.
Would you put it in Alma? Like, would you see the grade in Alma and then?
You would see a note in there.
Right, assuming they're checking. I'm just saying,
I know,
as a
I know.
parent,
I agree.
if my kid comes home and says, I need this signed, I'm gonna be really, it's in my face. I'm looking to see
Right,
how
and
they
then-
did and what they did wrong.
And then that might
How can I
ping you.
support?
Yeah, and that might ping you to then check.
At least
You know,
in
check-
fifth and
start
sixth grade,
checking
is they're
Alma.
new to trying
Maybe
to
I'm
do
also
it.
wondering though if it's an electronic assignment too. I don't know, like an assessment that's not a piece of paper. I would wonder how they would do that. Other than like an email or something, some type of communication. I should think about that. Because it's not always going to be paper.
Yeah, and I totally get that. It's just, I also think Google Classroom and everything is new to them. I would just want to make sure that we're giving parents as many opportunities to know that their kid is needing extra help.
Well, we're going to push the use of Alma in the notes within Alma. So, what I'm not sure about is if, there's almost like a notification. Well, if there's a certain comment that goes in, like needing the assessment, if it can push out information, but that would be a neat feature of it.
You could push out an email notification to that specific parent as well, so the teacher can say, your child has been, has an opportunity to reassess. This is the reassessment. So you get that email.
Yeah,
directly.
it's just as long
That would be
as
great.
families are really getting to know that.
So speaking of reassessments, 7th and 8th grade reassessment language talks about if a student turned in a completed assignment on time. What if they didn't turn in a completed assignment on time?
And we're trying to align with the high school, right? To get kids prepared going into high school. And I would say that it's really teacher discretion at that point. They need to work closely with the teacher to be able to do that.
The reason, can I step in as to why that was written like that? So there was concern that what if a kid is, they have something due, they write 4 sentences on it, it's nowhere near complete, they pass it in, and then cashing in on a reassessment. If a teacher gets something and it's nowhere near complete, it's not a valid attempt, that is a late work situation. That is no longer a reassessment situation. So that's where the teacher discretion at the high school kicks in.
What's the question about that? So, let's say a student performs, they get a 3, but they still want to go for the 4. And it says, at the discretion of the teacher. Is the teacher going to allow them to go for the 4 if they want to?
What reference?
No, just for reassessment.
No, they can reassess.
But it says per teacher discretion. I ran into this last year with my own student. She got a 3, she wanted to go for the 4, and was told no. And there was a 4 available, so the teacher discretion, I just want to make sure that
We are consistent.
that it's consistent amongst classes.
I just read it in the handbook that it says, at least at the high school level, you cannot reassess if it's above a 3 or you're not allowed to.
But it is happening. I
It
mean,
is
there are
happening.
teachers that allow it, and that's why the teacher discretion piece makes it, like,
That can be
it
adjusted.
can pin up teachers against each other, or students
Yeah.
are like, well, this class is. So it just seems like it should be, all teachers should be
I can see
enforcing that, yeah. Consistently.
All or none.
Yeah, all or nothing.
So according to this, if you're in 5th or 6th grade, it's a summative assessment and it's less than a 3, you can reassess. So if it would be a 3, you wouldn't be able to go for the 4. And then on the 7th and 8th grade, it doesn't say anything like about that.
And it just seems like we should want our kids to go for as far as they can go.
And then it says reassessment opportunities are available for formative assessments at the teacher's discretion. And those are all 5, 6.
So it references number 3.
1 and grade 1, 3.
So are you recommending to put
I was just
number
pointing
1,
out that they're different.
number 1, let's see, I'm just see if we could build some consistency here. So if you take number 1 under 5th and 6th grade and put it under 7th and 8th, that addresses your point, Jill, I believe.
Well, no, it just makes it so that any student that got a 3 wouldn't
That's
have.
the opportunity.
Less than proficiency.
So if you do well the first time you're proficient, but you still want to do it, you should have that opportunity to go further.
So what would you recommend?
Well, is there a problem with them being able to reassess after a 4? If they're on time?
So just so I can understand, so I'm in social studies class, I'm doing an assessment and I'm just not feeling it, that day, and I'm like, I look at the rubric, here's how I get a 4. I just, I really don't want to do that. I make sure that I get a 3. And so according to this, I wouldn't be able to reassess to get that, to get that 4 because I showed minimum proficiency. So now we're back to the philosophical, question is if a student makes that minimum proficiency and they just weren't feeling it that day, should they be afforded the opportunity to go back and get that 4?
Because in your scenario, you could, instead of getting a 3, you could just get a, I don't know, less than a 3, and you would then be able to reassess it that.
Right, but would that only bring me up to a 3, or would that bring me all the way to a 4?
That's not clear.
Right.
Depends how you did.
Right, but say you reassess when you were a 2.5 and you reassess and it's equivalent to a 4, do you get a 4 or do you get a 3?
Right, because the student who took it the first time got a 3, has
And
no
couldn't-
opportunity to get beyond
Right,
it.
so there
it
should
would
be a
beyond that.
maximum amount that you can reassess to.
So, I just think we're just looking at consistency, so like what?
That is one of, on my list of
Right.
complaints we've heard. That's one of the things
It's
we want to
consistency.
fix.
Can I ask a question on that?
Sure.
Again, because it's very similar between the middle school and the high school, so I know we're kind of addressing some of these together.
Yeah.
So I've heard in the last few meetings, different board members saying very different opinions on exactly this topic. About my kid should be able to get this grade on the first attempt and it should be a higher grade than a kid who had to reassess. Now I'm hearing somebody else say you should be able to reassess to whatever level. I'm not sure what the board is looking for if we're gonna make adjustments to this. So I'd like some clarification from the board.
That's why I just brought up, now we're back to the philosophical question of,
Right.
do we have a maximum amount that you can reassess to? And if you achieve that minimum proficiency, can you come back and reassess? And my personal opinion is, if you wind up with a 2.8, you should not be able to reassess to a 4. There should be a maximum amount that you can reassess to, especially at the high school level. And if we're going to be gearing them towards, gearing middle school towards high school, I don't think we should, afford that opportunity that may, kick them off in the career at the high school level.
In my opinion, there's no perfect answer to this because there are going to be various different reasons why a student did how they did on the first attempt on an assignment. A student could make every effort you know, I know we're talking about a situation where the student didn't put in his or her best effort on that first attempt and they got whatever grade they got. But other students do put their best effort forward. They get feedback from the teacher because they get their summative assignment back. It's like, okay, now I can go to a better level. I can go to that 4. I can take that next step. And if they produce within the scope of a policy or a practice, whether, you know, the reassessment policy or otherwise, should their grade reflect what they are now able to do, or cap it, which is kind of an artificial score of what they have demonstrated they're capable of doing at that point. The question that I'm asking is purely because I want to put in here what the board is going to pass. At this point, you know, and there's two varying, very, very different opinions coming from board members about this one in particular.
I just want to see it consistent. So if my daughter gets a 3 in one class and she asks to reassess and they say, no, it's a 3, if that's what it is, I don't want her to go to the class next door and say, I got a 3, can I try for a 4? And they got a 4 next door.
Yeah.
I just want it to be the same.
So, I mean, I've done some research on this, like when we were looking at the grading system and all that. And I will say, the fact that we put the reassessment procedures in here is a step that's a lot better than a lot of districts, because there are some that are on a 100-point scale that say, if you get an 80, you can reassess. It doesn't say what that means. It doesn't spell out what you can get. Does that student that got an 80 get 100 on the retake, get 100 on that assessment? I have no idea. But this isn't a grading scale discussion, because there's a lot of school districts, no matter, there are all kinds of different grading scales that are having that discussion. And a lot of them don't spell it out. So I was actually kind of curious what other places did, and I can't find it.
In places that I've taught, it was very much up to the classroom teachers. It was up to me. And that, I'm sure, bred inconsistency.
So in hearing the different opinions and philosophies behind this, is there a balance that you could find where if we look at that wording under 5th and 6th grade, opportunities will be made available to all students for any summative assessment that is less than proficient in order for that student to gain a 3, which is proficient. So if they take the summative right off the bat, and it's below a 3, they have an opportunity to reassess to the max of a 3. Because the goal is to make sure that a student is proficient. Then that eliminates I get a 2.8 or a 2.5 and I can reassess and get a 4, where this other student that got a 3 can't reassess to the 4. So you're setting a cap at your reassessment grade of a 3. So anything below a 3, you can reassess to gain a 3. If you take that summative right off the bat, you score above a 3, great. Get a 4, boom, you move on. Is that a balance?
I think it makes it very, very clear.
You get below a 3, you can reassess to score a 3.
Yes, as a parent, I'm always looking at, we have obviously different kids, different learning abilities. For the child that needs, they try it, they think they understand it, they try it, and they're not quite there. They go in, they work with the teacher. So you're saying automatically they can't get anything better than a 3, even though now they learned it. Isn't our focus to help kids learn? And I know when Mrs. LeBlanc was here, she specifically, Amanda talked about that. When you're capping it at a 3, that's not really fair either.
Yeah, you've got them to being to the proficient benchmark.
They can never shine.
I guess what would be the incentive to doing more? I guess if you got the 3 the first, you're not going to go back. If you can't go beyond it, then you're just done.
I guess my concern, and I'm going to use tenths of a point here, and maybe that's a bad thing, but my kid that gets a 3.3 wants to shine, they're not going to get that opportunity.
And what if he doesn't understand it that one time, Sean, and then you're telling him he can't get anything?
Well, and so therein lies my issue around one summative assessment should not equal the standard score. So if that's what we're saying, just so we're clear, I mean, whatever we're doing for consistency, but one test should, or project should not equal the summative. I feel very strongly about that. Because that is not a thing. I don't think that's how it works.
So if you had multiple summative assessments, then that would give the students the ability to say, all right, I did a 2.5 on this first one, I reassessed, I got my 3. Now I understand, how the assessments are and what the teacher is looking for. Now they can strive for
I'm just
better.
saying that's part of the reason in my opinion, because my kid did it too, did reassessments, because a lot of times, not across the board, but the one assignment, whatever the summative is, equaled that standard grade. And that, I think, is the bigger issue that I have.
Right, and that's why if in one class you can go and
exactly
get the 4, and you're driven, you want to.
Right.
But the next door you're told no.
So that's the larger, and that's why I asked the question, like, is formative going to come into this, and is there a requirement to have one summative equals the grade for that standard? And what if they had a bad day? What if they, that's my issue. So I want consistency, and then I do want opportunities for kids to shine. And I think a lot of teachers give multiple ways for them to show competency. But my experience has told me that sometimes that's why we're so worried about reassessment, because the reassessment equals the grade on the standard. And that's not how it's supposed to be. Yes.
I would also say that even if it was 3 pieces of evidence that was leading to a standard score, that a reassessment is still going to have a significant impact on the calculation of that standard score, which then leads into the course grade. So you make it 3 or 4, put in any grade terms you want, one of those 4 scores will have a significant impact on it.
Correct.
So if having an impact on whether or not a student can reassess is big, regardless of how many. You're not going to have a whole lot of standards that have 35 pieces of evidence that are counting, right? That kind of drown one out. So I guess what I just put down for the 2 possibilities are a cap of the reassessment score as 1, or any student can reassess to any score regardless of what they got on the first attempt. It seems like that's the 2 potential directions.
I would be more supportive of the second option on that, as long as we say that students can reassess to gain the maximum score available of a 4.
Right.
So just be specific with it. So my original thought of trying to find the balance, I wasn't necessarily supporting that. I would think that all students should be able to gain a 4. If that summative has an opportunity to gain a 4 on that, and all summatives have a 4, that a student can reassess. If they get something below a 4, they can reassess up to the 4. So we just put that word in there, opportunities will be available to all students for any summative assessment that is less than proficient in order to gain the highest score available as a 4.
We're right back to the same issue, is how do you differentiate between the student that does it the first time and the student that requires reassessment? There should be some way to differentiate between those 2 students.
Why?
And if they,
I don't think in a proficiency-based system, we're not looking at that. I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying that's the philosophical difference.
And I think based on your scenario that you threw out earlier, I'm going in there to take that summative assessment. I'm not feeling it today. Something happened that I'm just off my game today. Although I could definitely score a 4 on that summative, but not on that day. So I should be able to go back in there and reassess and score that 4 because I'm capable of doing that.
see, I would say that you need to I mean, if you make that choice, to not give your the 100%, effort, there are academic consequences associated with that.
But what if it's not a choice?
What if it's just a student who worked and they only could get a 2.5 that day? But then they worked so they could get a 2 or 3.
I don't buy into the philosophy of everybody wins and everybody gets a trophy.
I buy into just wanting kids to learn the material that's in front of them. So if it takes them multiple opportunities to get there, that's what they're there for.
And I'm thinking about the student that had something happen at home before they got on the bus, or they walked to school, that threw them off for the entire day. And they're given that summative on that day. And they don't have an opportunity to reassess when they're in a better place to gain that 4.
The 3 versus the 4, but if there's multiple summative
Not a
assessments,
one-shot deal.
then they'll have multiple opportunities in the future to be a high achiever, which should pull that up.
I wish I had a strong opinion, and I mean, I see both sides of it, and I'm also wondering, this would never happen, but in theory, you could have 20 kids in a class where 18 of them don't get a 4, and the teacher is reassessing 18 kids because they all want to get that 4. We're going to expect teachers to reassess their whole class multiple times.
It's unmanageable.
But that is a possibility that it's going to happen.
Possibility, but it's not a reality. I think that every kid wants to reassess. I mean, there are certain kids that they get 3 and they're happy with that. But we shouldn't limit kids who want to go beyond either.
I got a 3.8, now I feel pressure to reassess, and I thought I did a pretty good job the first time. Because everybody in the class is going to get a 4 except for me. I don't
I like that.
That would be here. Well, wait, that's not Yeah,
Can I-
not Gavin.
Yeah, hold on, please. We're having a discussion, so.
One last thing that I'd love for people to just take into consideration is particularly at the high school where standard scores are going to be calculated in Alma and teachers are no longer stepping back and creating the scores for standards, looking at the entire body of evidence. Reassessment is more important because in the past, like you're talking about, let's say that there's 6 assessments where a student demonstrates growth and by the end of it, they're hitting 3s and 4s very consistently. A teacher looks at that, makes that professional judgment, could give them a 3, 3.5, or 4, whereas in Alma, it is creating an average. So if on those first assessments, they didn't get it, they were struggling with it, there's a reason that there's a reassessment form and process rather than a kid just bringing it home, redoing it, and bringing it in. They're supposed to be communicating to the teacher why it is that they need to reassess, what they're going to do differently in order to prepare, what the process was to get them to where they landed. So if that kid is just going to be based on the straight average of those pieces of evidence, rather than a teacher being able to take into consideration the growth demonstrated, I think reassessment is more important. It's the learning process. And we want, in my opinion, the score that should be demonstrated or reported is where the student demonstrated he or she was able to achieve. And sometimes that means they needed another layer of feedback from the teacher.
So can the board settle on adding the wording, opportunities will be made available to all students for any summative assessment that is less than proficient in order for that student to score a 4? Adding in order for the student to score a 4?
Oh, you said less than proficient,
Can't be
which
less.
would mean anything under a 3. So like, I see both sides of this. So, you have the students that are struggling and need it. And that's the foundation of competency-based education. It's to allow people to be iterative, to do work, get feedback, do it again, build up till you get there. And then you have the students that, they do get it the first time. And it's a hard balance, but if you're gonna let one group do it, you gotta let both do it, in my opinion.
I agree.
What were you gonna say?
I was just going to say, opportunities made available to all students for a summative assessment to reassess to obtain a 4.
Yeah.
Just keep it simple.
I don't agree with that, but I'm only one vote.
I agree with him.
Like I said, it's how this was designed.
Right. My issue had always been the students who don't turn in their work and then at the end go back and can get 4s. That is an issue I have.
Well, that's where the pieces come in about the teacher, requiring formative work. In order to reassess, you might have to do some things before we allow you to reassess.
I mean, we've identified one of the potential failures of proficiency grading and competency grading, and I know I've spoken about it in the past. In an industrial arts setting, when I had to do safety exams, and my rule was you had to score 90 on the safety exams, and sometimes it would take students 3, 4, or 5. I think the max was 14 or 15 times to take that safety exam, versus the student who paid attention and listened and studied and took it the first time and got the 90 or the 95. In the real world, as a potential employer, you want the employee that's trainable, and if a potential employee is going to have to be shown relatively simple tasks 5 or 8 or 15 times, that's not good for the employer, and that's where I think it's very important to differentiate between those two students somehow. I don't know.
I would say the difference is these are 10 and 12-year-olds, so.
Well, I know, I understand that, but I had middle school students that were doing industrial arts, and they were taking, safety exams for a majority of the equipment in an industrial arts setting. They weren't using a table saw, and they weren't using a router table, but they could use a scroll saw, they could use a bandsaw, and there was, some significant information that they needed to know.
So Mark, just so you know, my perspective is that, and I have employed people who have had to take assessments or assignments 15 times, but the perseverance of that person who is not able to get it on the first time, but they are working hard to try to get it, is a huge piece for me. So that shows me something. I understand what you're saying, but I'm also like, the flip side is that person is learning some valuable skills as well.
Oh, and I'm not saying that they
employers
fail.
appreciate.
And I'm not saying that they stay at a 1.5 or 2. I'm just saying I think it's very appropriate to have a max, of that 3, which shows, yes, they got there. They crossed that finish line and they made it, and they know what they need to know. But they didn't knock it out of the park, the first time.
And I'm just not sure that maybe, what if that student did want to go on and try to achieve a 4? That might take another 16 times of reassessment, but wouldn't you want to encourage the 4 there too? I'm just asking.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, and also, sorry, if you have a student, let's say they get a 2.8 or a 60 or whatever rating it's applied to it, if you tell them, okay, like you can only get up to this point, but there's additional knowledge that they have the opportunity to learn and apply, you're kind of hindering them to do the bare minimum if they didn't get it the first time. That's where I'm struggling with this. Like I said, the competency-based education is designed to give students multiple opportunities to get there. And that's great when students get it the first time.
Well, what's the definition of there? Is it,
No,
is it an 80?
yeah.
Is it a 90? Is it a 3?
The highest score
Available.
So I think, don't bring us back to the wording here.
All students for any summative in order to obtain a 4. Just leave it at that. Because then that means that any student can reassess in order to gain the highest score available. Not everybody agrees with it. Just trying to move the wording along here.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Jeff and Sean have said nothing, so I know Mark's a no. You don't feel strongly one
I
way or
don't
the
know.
other?
I see both sides.
Okay, fine. You don't have, you can. Okay. All right, moving forward.
So what's the plan?
Well, it's,
That's going to read, opportunities will be made available to all students for any summative assessment in order to obtain a 4.
And, sorry, to keep being a dead horse, but I'm missing it. But how many assessments?
There's no number attached.
Just one reassessment? Or take it a bunch of times? Or? One,
There's no cap on
1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 8 assessments.
The reference in the policy is that the reassessment has to be done, the process has to be done within 10 days of the original submission.
I mean, my vote doesn't count in the overall, but like, part of me is leaning towards, yeah, they can reassess to get up to a 4, but they're not going to reassess for 20 tries, you know?
That's why we put a time frame around
An
it.
opportunity on that bad day or something horrible will happen, you have an opportunity to reassess, but there's a limit at some point.
There's a time limit.
Right, so run out of time. Once you reassess, the teacher then has to go through it, so I mean, in a period of time, there's so much that can happen.
okay. What else with the middle school handbook? We're still on middle school, that bleeds into little high school. I had a question about the addition of any fees owed to the district must be paid in full in order to participate in promotion. I understand why that's in there, but I'm concerned about lunch fees. And if we're punishing potentially students who can't earn their own money.
I was curious what those fees were. Is it lunch or are there other fees?
The biggest one that we see is Chromebook damage. That was more what I was thinking of this, but it would have to be spelled out. Or indoor. There was a lot of talk about, people that owes lunch money too in terms of collections and things like that. So I'm open to that, but specifically in my mind, it was around the Chromebook damages, things like that.
I think it'd be helpful to be specific with that. I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, Vanessa and Matt on this one, those food service fees are taken into consideration for graduation. However, for 8th grade promotion, it would be more of the Chromebook damage and so forth.
It would be nice if everything was zeroed out by the time they come to the high school, because to be honest, you have some students who come to us with already a huge amount of debt. And it's not ideal to be the bad guy that, well, from the last 8 years of school, you've accumulated a debt and now you can't participate in senior week or events.
Because of the 7th grade then.
Because of something, from 7th grade.
Yeah, I get that. I just worry about the student can't yet earn money. I don't know. So.
We're talking about kids that don't have their own means necessarily to pay those fees.
Right, whereas in high school, they.
Would that be the same for Chromebook money though too? How would they pay for the Chromebook damage?
I haven't had the same thought around it as a whole, but I understand why we would need to do that. So I'm struggling with it. I'm pointing it out because the student probably damaged the Chromebook, so there's that. But I don't know the answer. I have no answer.
Happy to put in whatever. Just,
Well,
it's really about
just-
accountability in terms of, we've seen a lot of Chromebook damage in money owed to the school or district because of damages.
And are we collecting it?
Trying.
We have our greatest success when they hit their senior year.
Right. Right. And I don't know if this would help with, I don't know, Chromebook damage, I'm more okay with saying this too for some reason, whereas I wouldn't want a student not to eat because of lunch fees, which I know we can't do. I just mean if they're not given money for lunch. I don't know why I feel that way, just telling you. That's my.
So leave it?
I don't know. I was just
You
asking.
propose,
I think it's appropriate. I mean,
you propose putting some more specific wording.
Specific to Chromebook
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Oddly enough.
at the middle school level.
How are you gonna take it all to high school?
We're only on the middle school now,
Right.
so yeah.
I mean, unless people feel differently and want to put lunch
conversation
here
is
too,
blended
I
between
mean,
all of
I
the schools.
can be swayed. I'm just saying I was concerned about it.
So their struggle really gets complicated is with the student that has a debt for lunch, also has a debt for Chromebook, Chromebook damage. If we separate the two out and just specify Chromebook damage, I really want to walk, and mom and dad, fix the Chromebook. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, money's money. Why? What's the difference? I don't know.
Yeah.
So I'm perfectly satisfied with the wording the way it is, but it doesn't sound like people want to include lunch debt in with that as well.
I don't.
Well, leave it.
That's fine.
Maybe for the second reading, we'll have a different thought.
You never know.
Can I go way back?
Sure.
Bottom of the handbook, page 16. Grade reporting, we're reducing the number of times per year we're sending on formal reports.
Correct.
So I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure we're all clear that Alma plays a big piece of that. And now we're shifting the onus from the school district to the families to keep track of progress. So I think we have to over-communicate the Alma piece, over-communicate training opportunities, because I'm okay with it, but we're gonna have families that complain because the school district didn't provide me with enough information about my kid. We did, it's all true.
I was talking to the parent of a high school in another district. They get one a year at the end of the year. It's on them throughout the year to go into Alma.
Which is fine, it's another change towards moving towards electronic and moving the responsibility onto the family, so just, we have to let them know.
I'm excited to be able to go in at any time and check, and have it be accurate.
Yeah.
So, that was one of the issues I had with Empower, it was never accurate.
Anything else?
On the academic eligibility, I'm on page 27. 27 in the handbook. What is the page for us? 70 in our packet. I think athletes should be held to a higher standard, and I think a 2 isn't that high standard. Secondly, I think if you're in an athletic season, it's always been practice in any school that I worked at over decades that athletes had basically progress reports sent to the coaches every 2 weeks for eligibility.
Never heard of that.
Is the athletic director here?
And
How often do coaches get determinations of ineligibility?
It's different between the middle school and high school, but the middle school last year was 6 times.
And it corresponded with progress.
Five, and then the end of the year.
And it corresponded with progress reports.
Yes. Yep.
So now the dates align with basically the beginning of the season.
Also, it says starting fall of 2025. Should that be 2024 or is it truly 2024?
No, so that's a complete shift. So we've never taken spring grades to hold accountability for eligibility for fall sports. So just want to get that language out there, letting people know like this spring, right, those grades are going to be used for eligibility for next fall.
That's good. Good thing my kids are sooner.
Should this also be academic and co-curricular eligibility?
It should be, yes. Where do you not see that?
Under.
Student participating in co-curricular activities and interscholastic athletes.
So it's
teams will have
everything?
Academic progress review.
Okay.
So like towards the, it says it towards the bottom.
So, Mark, you're proposing to up the minimum requirements? Is that just to go back to what you had?
yeah, I mean, I definitely think the athletes, should be held to a fairly high standard. And the way to achieve that is, I mean, once they pass their classes to start basketball, then if they don't do a spring sport, it's basically it's done right there after.
Because there's no other.
There's no consequence. Well, except for starting in 25. If they do have a fall sport, then that would cause them to bring the spring grades.
Yeah, they're end of the year. Yeah.
Right. Which is definitely that's I love seeing that. But even as a teacher, I had to fill out progress reports for athletes all the time, and as a coach, I was requesting that stuff because kids go up and down in their in their grades, and if they start blowing it, as a coach, they weren't at first they were practicing, not playing, and then if it didn't improve, they weren't even practicing.
So just to clarify here, it says to work on standards that didn't meet our minimum requirement of a 2.0 for eligibility. So that's any individual standard, right?
Correct.
It's not the overall.
Okay.
So that overall is going to be, in theory, much higher than 2.0.
So I know we've had this discussion before. To earn credit, you needed to have an average of I think it was a 2.5 with no individual standard below a 2.
In high school.
Or in high school, okay.
The only other a suggestion, I guess, the only other thing I would suggest with this, just kind of some background, eligibility checks are very time consuming. They take a lot of time to kind of prepare because there's not a button you can push to say you're eligible or not. It doesn't work that way. Unless the coaches or the athletic department has a form that the students can bring to their teachers to sign, I would say that would be more manageable rather than someone, I see these 3 eligibility checks throughout the year manageable, but if you want more eligibility checks, I think the onus has to be on the athlete and or the coach to facilitate that. It's very time consuming for our school counselors, our office staff to do full eligibility checks.
I think that's a great stance. I mean, it's it puts a lot of responsibility on the student to bring that around. Also, from the, from the AD's perspective, it needs to be clear with the coaches too. That, if the students are blowing it off and not bringing it down, or bringing it to the coaches, there needs to be, consequences on their end as well.
Other thoughts? So, are we wanting Mr. Pope to put something like that in there? I'm unclear. I know Mark is suggesting that, but I haven't heard from anyone else.
So that would be something I'd want to talk with Cayman about, because
Okay.
that's more, that is more on Cayman and the coaches.
Yeah.
So I'd like to talk to him more about that,
Okay.
if that's something that you're interested in.
I mean, I definitely think you could talk to him. I just wondered where everybody else was feeling.
I don't think it needs to go in the handbook, but logistical process in general. That's my thoughts.
We need to have accountability. I want to do it. Many moons ago when I was in this high school, we had to do the same thing.
Yeah.
So.
I guess
don't see a big deal with it.
Yeah, so to that point, Michael, I agree all the details wouldn't have to be in there. I guess the piece would be if we don't put it in here, I know after wouldn't mean it wouldn't happen because it's not in writing. So it doesn't say halfway through I'm making this up, halfway through the season, the athlete will go to their various teachers and do X, Y, and Z, whatever came up with.
So I think the appropriate place would be in the athletic handbook.
Okay.
Which lays that out, to lay that process out if we're to develop one.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me. That's fine, and then you can.
Because you're talking specifically
That's.
athletes.
I just.
And co-curriculars.
Well, co-curriculars, but that would also be in Keenan's handbook too.
Yeah, co-curriculars, when co-curriculars was a year.
I thought this was specific to athletes.
So
So the original point we brought up.
Randy was
Aren't they
including
treated the
co-curriculars.
same?
It should be the same.
Yeah.
Jumping in on that. What prompted the conversation?
Well, it said eligibility, and under the eligibility, it gets into both of them, so.
It covers all of it.
So, yeah, it's student athletic / co-curricular handbook.
That's where it should go.
Okay. Anything else for the middle school handbook? CES. Thank you, Mr. Pope.
Hello.
Hello.
So, like Ben mentioned, we met to compare our handbooks and see where we differed. And each of us added some things that the other might not have had. So the section that I didn't have was homework. It's not a change in that we are already doing it that way. It's just putting it in the handbook for families. Everything else he already kind of spoke to, so I won't take up more time. Any questions on my handbook?
I have one. So for grading, it's grades K through 4, and I know there's no 5th grade next year.
Correct.
But doesn't it make more sense to include it overall than to assess in another year?
I asked for Mr. Terzi's guidance on that, and he said to leave it out for this year.
Yeah, because it's per year, so we would add that in for the 25-26 handbook. Grade 5. Because next year you're only talking K to 4.
So if there's no 1st grade, would we update it to be K 2, 3, 4, and 5? Like it's a K through 5 school, we just don't have the class for next year. I know we kind of talked about this, that it wasn't like something that was eliminated. I know when parents see this, there's going to be some concerns. Because although there's no 5th grade class because the students chose to go, we didn't choose to eliminate 5th grade from Canterbury. So that's my concern here.
Well, that would then raise, if we did K to 4, are we going to use the same 5th grade scale that we use at BMS, so add those scales in there? So when Aaron asked me this question, it was specific to the grade configuration that the school is offering next year.
Mhm.
And then the following year, grade 5 would be included. And then we have a conversation, do we add in the middle school scale for grade 5?
Well, what
And
if,
to your point around first grade, I can't imagine that we wouldn't have a
you never know.
first grade, particularly if we have a kindergarten class in there.
Well, the scale also covers K to 4, whether you have that grade or not.
So we could put, there's two things I'm thinking about. One is somewhere, I don't know where, we can put Canterbury, I don't know, something that Canterbury is a K to 5 school, doesn't currently have 5th grade, or under grading, grade 5 grading, and then it can just say no 5th grade this year. I don't know. But you gotta, to address the concern, it doesn't make sense to say K to 5. And I don't know that it'd be interesting to see if when we run a grade 5 there, which grading scale would we use?
We just add a footnote that says, although Canterbury Elementary is a K through 5
yeah.
school,
that's what I was.
We're not currently running a 5th grade for the 2024-2025, or 2024-2025 school year.
I like the footnote. That makes
I
more
would be
sense.
happy with that.
Okay. I was like,
Is the elementary school, it's called Canterbury Elementary School, correct?
Mm-hmm. And it is a K through 5 school. It's just for this upcoming year. It was a small class and all of them chose to go
Yeah.
to the middle school.
Yeah. I guess I'm looking at it very, very black and white. Because at 5th grade, now you're within the district, that's middle school level.
well, it's middle school level. My understanding is originally it moved to the middle school because there was no space at the elementary school.
Right. Yep.
So.
Yeah, because prior to that, it was K6.
Right.
So suggestion on page 7 of
Yeah.
the actual handbook,
Yeah.
under program,
Oh, yeah.
under that lovely picture of the school. Canterbury Elementary School offers students a broad and well-balanced curriculum, instruction at all grade levels, and put it in there. So grade levels include K of 4 for the 24-25 school year.
That works.
Typically, CES is a K to 5 school or something to that.
Something
Something
like
to that
that.
effect.
So
I
something in
understand why
there.
you brought it up,
Under
Randy.
program.
'Cause
Yes.
It is something that most people who send their kids to CES feel pretty strongly about the opportunity to keep your kids at CES for 5th grade or to send them to Belmont Middle School.
So we can wordsmith a sentence in there about what grade levels are offered.
Yes, yeah. Thank you.
Great.
What else we see? Mine were all addressed by talking to DES, so. Other things for CES.
Okay. Thank you.
BHS, Mr. Finch.
Hello.
Hello.
So similar to Mr. Pope in my principal's welcome page, I tried to highlight some of the changes and adjustments. I know we've discussed a number of these, but I'm happy to answer any questions about what we've discussed or anything else that's up for potential revision.
I liked the wording from BMS where it says, and the intro to BMS is the change to Alma real-time access to students' formative and summative scores. So I
In the intro?
yeah, it was in their intro to grading, I think. I like Mr. Pope's wording on that. I thought we
You know how good that makes me feel.
So, just a thought. Go ahead. Sean.
You noted the changes under the principal's welcome. I love that you put the pages on the first couple bullets.
It's because there's stuff that's gonna come out, like some of the things that are crossed out, so those page numbers are gonna all change.
Okay.
So it's didn't make, I will
But
put
you
page
will, okay,
100%.
that's all. Yeah.
Yeah.
How much of an issue are tardies and unexcused absences?
Significant.
So that being said, I assumed, I thought that the answer was yes.
Yeah.
I'm kind of thinking that there should probably be more severe consequences as they work their way up from 3 to 6 to 9 to 12 to 15. Especially at the high school level, you miss one day, it's really 2 days worth of curriculum.
Can I address that?
Because of block
since
scheduling.
I'm the one who handles those.
Discipline.
You want to come on up?
Come on up, Vanessa.
Sure. So I think one of the challenges with those things is always the fact that as students get more independent, that they will naturally refuse to participate in those. And so if you have a student who drives and then refuses to do a detention, it turns into a longer detention, then they refuse to do that detention, and it turns into an ISS, and then they refuse to go to that, and it turns into a continuous issue. And it takes up an extenuating amount of time for our attendance secretary and for myself and things like that to try to track down students when it is tardies to school. And so I understand what you mean. It is almost a natural consequence of being tardy to school that they are missing class time. And it is one of those things that has never fixed itself, even from when we were all in school, that there are kids who are going to be tardy. The most significant thing is when they, have revoked driving privileges, but sometimes if they don't have anything to be restricted, if they're not an athlete, if they don't drive to school, if there's nothing else to take away from them, simply having them be at detention and then having them continue to skip that, there's really not a lot that we can hold over their head. And so at some point they can just choose not to comply.
And at the end of the day, the reason that you have consequences related to attendance is that you want kids to be there to learn and to be academically successful.
Right.
And if a kid's not showing up and they're skipping things, they're also missing all that class time, and they're probably going to be suffering academically too, which is a shame. But
One of the things that in my master's program for administration, one of the things that we tried was once they hit their tardies, and we would assign Saturday, whether it was a 2 hour or 4 hour, the expectation was that mom or dad showed up with them, and that took tardies and almost made them non-existent with that. It worked in that scenario. I'm not saying that it would work in every scenario. But it was a paradigm shift, and that was considered to be far more significant, consequences, with that. And so I understand the dilemma that you're in. I'm just, looking at it, understanding that it's an issue. I mean, we've discussed it here, before.
Most often, the shift that we have with the parents is that the students and the parents who do not value education don't see any reason for their students to stay after for a detention, let alone be on time to school. And so they are certainly then not going to show up to school to serve a detention alongside their child. And those are just some things that we as educators, no matter how much we care, are not going to fix about our current culture. And we don't have Saturday detentions. We keep them on Friday afternoons, and that's a struggle to get them there for that.
Do you tow vehicles when you suspend parking?
we've never had to.
Would you?
I have to have some conversations with Mr. Chersey.
So it's parking passes suspended. If
great idea.
kids
So
are,
yeah.
like, what's going to prevent them from just parking and coming anyways?
I don't know, knock on wood or whatever, but we've literally never had a situation for, whether it's for a situation with tardies or other behavioral issues that we revoked parking privileges, we have not had kids do it.
So if you get to 12 and you suspend it, they resolve it themselves and they...
Yeah.
So this resets every quarter, and so they have the opportunity to start fresh. every quarter with trying to kind of, be on time for school.
Right the ship. But yeah, they find a way. And sometimes it becomes a nuisance to the parent because now the parent has to give them a ride. Or we've had, students and parents who are upset about this. This is the only way my kid can get to school. And that is not the case because there's a big yellow thing that we can always make sure that there is a route associated with that student's stop. So a student has the opportunity to get to school. They may not want to ride the bus.
So I'm looking at this, and I'm hearing this correctly, the parking is it's effective.
Carrot.
Yep. 9 is your senior privileges revoked. That only deals with 1 of 4 classes. The parking, maybe 2 of 4. Maybe we should bump these up a little earlier if they're effective. Like, so if you get 9, your parking pass is suspended. If it's effective and it's an issue,
Yeah.
because like I said, the 9, it's a 2.5-hour detention and your senior privileges revoked. But I'm assuming that children of all grades, not just seniors, do this? Or,
Yeah. And freshmen and sophomores who don't drive are also falling into this boat.
Right.
So, loss of parking, loss of senior priv doesn't have any impact on a freshman and some sophomores who aren't driving yet. It doesn't mean we can't move it up.
Yeah.
Something that I would like you to take into consideration, we only do detentions 2 days a week. And so when they do that, because we have a detention monitor, so we have them scheduled, we run 1 hour long detentions 2 days a week and 2.5-hour detentions 1 day a week. And so a student could conveniently be, piling on those 2.5-hour detentions before they have an opportunity to serve them. So I would never want a student having a backlog of 2.5-hour detentions before they had the opportunity to serve a consequence before they were issued another one. So that is sometimes what happens is we're not dealing with students who only have tardies. They might miss 3 days of school and then have 2 days of tardies and then be in 1 day and then they're missing 3 days of school. So sometimes catching up with kids, because oftentimes the students who are absent so often also have truancy issues, also are not there to do their schoolwork, also have a barrage of other things going on. So it's not usually just one issue.
So, any guidance to?
I think we are handling it pretty effectively, and the consequences that we have for it do serve their purpose. If you're asking for an opinion, I know you didn't. If you're asking for an opinion, I would recommend not changing it. I think that the tardies to class is what we're trying to hammer home for this coming year, is so that they don't then become tardy to their other individual classes. This only takes care of the tardies to school.
And this discipline is progressive in nature, but the conversation has reminded me that I need to put into my 24-25 parking pass.
So you're okay with towing?
I know it costs money
not
though.
expensive district.
You buy a boot? Very good.
So we done with that one?
Unless you have other people have suggestions for you. This is adding, you are adding dismissals, unexcused dismissals.
Yep.
That's what the,
And that, I'll say, is not as prevalent an issue, but it has proven to be an issue for some students.
Would that just be in the category of truancy? Unexcused dismissal?
No, because you have to have a certain amount of time for it to even count as a half day of absence,
Gotcha.
one way or the other.
Right, yep.
All right, have a great night.
No, I got one.
yeah, go ahead.
I know we've discussed it, numerous times. Earning credit at a 2.0. I mean, I've had conversations with the DOE. It is common understood expectations that districts are at a 3 for earning credit on the proficiency scale. Belmont has always been a fairly high achieving, middle class community. Used to be blue collar, now it's, just more middle class. I know you've raised issues, that of having fairly high, failure rates. I don't think the solution to the problem is lowering the bar. I truly believe that we should be maintaining that 3 for passing or for credit.
I guess what I'd like, some of that phrasing, at least for this year, assuming that some of the other things in the handbook are approved, it's not a lowering of the bar, it's a changing of the bar. Because there has not been a descriptor of way 1, 2, 3, or 4 that has existed. It's been, we've had all these conversations about consistency and clarity, and having a scoring key now has some level of descriptor in terms of what that even means. So a 2, as it applied in the last 4 or 5 years, is not necessarily what a 2 means now. Because a teacher could have been assigning something a 2 that does no longer fit the description of what a 2 has to be on a summative assignment based on that key. So I hear what you're saying. We had lots of conversations as a faculty about that, and we had an activity where if you strongly disagree, or you disagree, or you agree, or you strongly agree that 2.5 is too high a mark, and it was sort of spread out, but I'll say that more people disagreed that it was too high a mark. I would also say, again, that all of this has to be taken into context altogether. With a change in what a 2, a 3, or a 4 means, we're not sure what that impact is going to be. It could be that all of a sudden students are getting much better grades because they've got more of a clear understanding of what they have to do, and teachers know what needs to happen at each of the levels on summative, but
that hasn't really changed, has it?
That there's a definition
there's
for
always, there's since going all the way back to 2008, 8 or 9, a 3 was considered to be, proficient, and the goal was once you created those standards, you had 1, 2, 3, and hopefully to 4. 3 listed out, what you had to do. Algebra 1, you can solve algebraic equations, 100% of, consistency or whatever, whatever it winds up being. So that really hasn't changed.
I guess I'll jump back to a question that you asked Silas, either 1 or 2 meeting, I think it was last meeting, about where proficiency scales have a descriptor of proficient. And he said, we're not really taking anything out of those scales. It needs to be reorganized because some of the things that are listed as proficient need to go somewhere else because they match different descriptors. It's all going to be in there. It's just they're not placed where they need to be placed in all of those proficiency scales right now.
So I just want to clarify, Mark, the message I have from you says that they didn't want, the DOE's understanding is that proficient is a 3. So it wasn't related to grading, at least in the text that I have from you. So when we look at this, we aren't saying that a 2 is proficient. We are saying a 2 is enough to get credit. So I'm making the distinction intentionally.
Right. So then, okay, so are we carving out credit is different than proficient?
Yes.
Yes.
Which is the same why there's a difference between a 64 and 100 if we to use the Carnegie unit. Because or depending on the Carnegie unit that you use, a 64 or a 60 in some districts would receive credit, but one would argue a 64 is not proficient. So I'm making that distinction.
Right. So you basically you made me ask another question, which I'd have to follow up with the DOE, is whether it's their understanding that proficient equals credit.
They don't.
And I never asked that. Question.
But they don't set grading scales. So I'm just telling you why I'm okay with it is because for me, when I read this, we're still saying a 2 is partially proficient as I read what Mr. Finch put together. And then because we have wherever it is, I'm all lost in this thing, where it
You're asking about the outline of the letter grades?
Yeah, so it's showing
that's-
the equivalent, which is
Yeah.
why I'm okay with it.
That's
because I
associated,
see-
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, no.
No, it's just so you can find it more easily. It's right with the honors and AP and early college weighting.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So that's
Where
where that
is it?
can be found.
Page 18.
Yeah, so for me, when I look at a D minus is a 2.0.
That makes sense.
So that's why, just so you know why I'm okay with it, is we're
Gotcha.
not saying a student's proficient, but for a course grade, if they get a 2, it's a D minus, and parents can clearly see. I guess I'm a little concerned that it's under the honors AP college grading, because
Yeah, I was just looking at
I
that.
wonder if we should also show it,
I can move it.
just because I would want it where the grading
Yeah.
is, so that I can look at that, so you can see that. But just so you know, that's why I'm okay with it.
Yep.
Yeah, I put it there just so you could see what would be on the
Yes.
transcript versus what would impact the GPA.
Correct.
Yeah.
I understand, but just clear.
Yeah. No, and again, I mean, that's just gonna prompt me to have a follow-up conversation, because every district that I've worked within, that we had to generate, the competencies, and everything. I mean, even, I believe they're still doing it the same way, both, Franklin and Winnisquam. I believe they're still tying credit to a 3. Not 100% positive on that. They were when I was there.
So for me, also, you, I know I said this earlier, but just, you have. I'm sure you're. I should. It's for formative and summative scores. I think if we're gonna, include, I liked how you put in, like, they'll have at least one formative a week or something. Yeah. Or by the,
Yeah, there's gonna be grade updates going, like, there's gonna be at least scores going in up each week.
yeah. But if we're gonna start including formative in the overall calculations, probably would affect Mr. Cook. I think we should tell families that.
Yeah, it's any assessment that has the root to a 4.
Right.
So we can put that in, because that could either be a formative or a summative. It's certainly more frequently or more consistently going to be associated with a summative assignment versus a formative.
And so I highlighted that was one of the complaints we heard, was the inconsistency in grading.
Right.
And so it sounds like there might still be formatives that are out of a 2-point scale, but they're not going to count towards
the
their
summative.
grade.
I mean,
And-
towards the grade.
And Alma has the capacity that you can report that, a parent can see it, but it doesn't impact the standard score, and then therefore wouldn't impact the course score. So you can still be providing that feedback. It would just basically have a weight of 0 in terms of impacting the student's grades.
How many got?
Yeah, go on.
All right. Page 18, honors AP early college grading.
Mhm.
It looks like there's a multiplier of 1.25.
Correct.
What did we have in the past?
1.05. It's a significant increase.
Okay.
So
My follow-up question before you get to it is, I think that was a concern we heard, but is 1.25 somewhat consistent? Like, is that a
Yeah, so,
common?
yeah, there's 2 different ways of approaching impacting GPA because of honors, AP, early college, things like that. There's either added credit or there's a multiplier. Added credit schools, it doesn't matter what a student gets, they get the exact same increase. For example, when I was teaching there, Guilford High School was an added credit. So if a student got, we'll put it in these terms, a 3.1, they got a 4.1. If a student got a 3.8, they got a 4.8. It didn't matter what the student got in that honors, early college, or AP class, they got the exact same bump. When you utilize a multiplier, it actually plays a little bit more homage to the fact that a kid was more successful in those classes. Because yes, they get the exact same multiplier amount, but that student was, we're talking a lot about differentiating one student's level of success versus another. If a student gets a 3.1 in this system versus a 3.8, the 3.8 gets a greater bump because 3.8 times 1.25 is more than, the increase is higher. So that's why that scale looks as it does.
Okay. So I guess another follow-up, because I think this will probably get asked, but this is for the handbook for 24-25.
It's retroactive.
It's going to be retroactive.
So any current students, anything that they took in their first three, like a senior this year, anything honors AP, a lot of students it would only be honors like the early years, but any students who took those freshman, sophomore, junior years, they will be impacted this way, which is kind of a nice way of utilizing Alma and doing some of that grade entry, because those classes, as they're put into the Alma system, have the value of 1.2, the GPA impact of 1.25. So in a way, it kind of took away a step. Because in past years, it was 1.05, now it's 1.25, now it's just going to be across the board. So you'll see some students who are coming in, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, whose GPAs before they take a class this year will have gone up. The reason, by the way, that it's 1.25 versus the 1.05 is so that way if a student gets a 4.0 in an honors early college or AP class, their GPA is impacted by a 5.0, which is what the local added value schools do. So a student can get the same GPA impact of a 5.0 on a 4-point scale that you would see in other places that add a 1.0 GPA, if that makes sense.
Got it.
Will a letter go home explaining this to students, or about the retroactive?
Yeah, we can certainly allude to that. We could put it in the handbook if you want.
It reminds me of like Monopoly free money. Like they're just gonna go in and their GPA is gonna be higher, and if they don't know why.
Congratulations, everybody.
Because the GPA right now is based on a 1.05.
Right.
So if this goes through, when we vote on it and stuff, automatically it's going to be recalculated.
Right.
Which is why you're saying it's going to go up.
The multiplier from 3 years ago, that was at 1.05, will be wiped and it'll be multiplied by 1.25 instead. That puts our class of 2025, some of the concerns that have been around finances, not completely to rest, obviously, but it will have a significant impact on this year's seniors and students moving forward.
In my understanding, with talking to school counseling department, is it puts us in line with the other local districts, so that we're not
or ahead
scholarships against
for
other
scholarships and things like that, and it'll help with the local colleges in New Hampshire too.
Sure. And I think, multiplier versus added value, that is something college admissions are going to be very familiar with, because schools just have to make a decision, it's one or the other. Or they don't do anything. There's some schools that just report straight on the transcript straight. Yeah.
So just for something for the board to think about when it comes back for our second reading, where we're celebrating, and for the most part, we're considered to be a good thing that we're differentiating the high achieving students with the multiplier, but we spent half an hour coming to the conclusion that we shouldn't differentiate between students that were on the lower end of that achievement scale. I don't want to go back to debate that. I just want to point that out to the board for something to think about that may impact our second reading.
So these are just for a certain set of classes, or not?
Yeah, that's how I was.
So I don't see the conversation the same.
Okay.
Just so you know.
But I would just add, like I mentioned before, somebody that's old school like me that goes by the A to F system, I would love for any progress reports, whatever that's sent out to parents, to have this matrix on page 18.
Yeah, like Mr. Pope was saying, I don't know what the capacity is for that.
Yeah.
And I did put on here that it's for reference, it's.
Yeah.
But
there are people that use, that only know the letter grade. They don't care about the 100-point scale. They care about, did I get an A or a B or a C or whatever. And that's a quick way to check that.
There was a lot of white space on Alma, so maybe they could put in like some helper text that says for comparison, refer to student handbook.
Yeah.
Because even if you put an attachment, someone's still gonna have to open it. So
I'm fairly confident that they have ours on our, we use Alma, and our grading scale is right on the cover, so I'm fairly confident I'll be able to be there.
What else? Sean? Mary? Jeff? Jill? You have to update Jeff and I's board terms. It's a little thing in comparison to what we're talking about, but. I think we talked about some of this stuff already, so anything else? Thank you.
Seem like you're fishing for more.
I just want to make sure.
Are you sure there's no more questions?
Are you sure?
Nobody?
Just
Nobody?
ready for them.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Athletics. Oh, athletics handbook. Hi, Cameron.
And co-curricular.
And co-curricular.
Which it says right on the cover.
Not really much changed other than stuff with the grading for the two schools, so those are really the only changes within that. So obviously, the final wording of what all that will be could change depending on how all the conversations and such go.
In the listing of offerings,
Yes.
it says like boys basketball AB, girls basketball
It
AB.
doesn't mention fifth and
Doesn't men-
sixth.
yeah.
I
Are
was
we-
actually looking at it, yes.
Didn't know if we were
No,
going
I will
away or-
add that in and into the thing. Because I also know that under the academic expectations, I forgot to change the 5 checkpoints to 3 as well, so I've already made a note for that as well.
I know we kind of touched on it when we were, at the middle school, but as far as eligibility, and I don't know what the general consensus is, within the athletic season. I think it's a great idea for the students to bring those, progress reports to the teachers on a 2-week rotation. But again, I believe, you and Mr. Terzi were going to talk about that as well.
Well, because the one thing I want to make sure too, and I'm 100% about holding kids accountable and making sure that, they're getting stuff that they need to get done, but I do always feel like between athletics and co-curriculars, the athletes tend to get way more of the hit with these types of things because, how are you going to do that for a play or how are you going to do that for certain events that are happening? Whereas it's a little bit easier with the athletics because you got to see you got your checks and stuff, so it's not that I have an issue with doing them because I think keeping kids before they're sunk is the greatest thing, keeping up with that. I just want to make sure that it applies across the board, not specifically on athletes.
I would say across.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the lead of the play isn't making grade. It might require the play doesn't go on, or maybe they have a backup. I don't know. But I think it should apply across any co-curricular or athletic team.
So I just think it would obviously take some discussion about how to make that
Yeah.
make sense.
So I think principals and you and Mr. Chersey can talk. And we can talk about it at second reading. But yeah.
So I'm not seeing the part in here about the spring grades impacting the fall.
It's under the academic section, it's like the last bullet point that's highlighted. I think you might be on the high school one. I can't see that part.
I looked at both, yes, I
Yeah, grade report 3 and
I'm
the school
talking
year.
high school,
In the
sorry.
middle school, it's on page 5.
Right, and so then I looked because I was gonna make sure they were consistent.
Do we do that for the high school as well? This starting in fall of 20, do we already do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
And where is that in high school?
It's not necessarily specifically written out like that, it's just the last check has always affected the start of the fall.
Maybe we should put that in. Because if it's not in writing.
Yep.
I don't know, just other thoughts? Don't put
I
it in
agree.
just because I suggested.
We do clean the slate when a student comes in as a 9th grader. So the
Okay.
spring grades into 8th grade, we want students to get engaged. We want students to
Yep.
feel connected when they come to the new school and have a new opportunity. So just so you know that 8th grade spring is not going to impact 9th grade fall.
And I can get behind that.
Anything else? In the team tryouts evaluations, middle school.
Yep.
So it just says that students in grades 5 through 8 will be able to try out.
Yeah.
They can only make the B team, but for like baseball, softball, it's only 8. They're just like
Yeah, so when it's just the A team, that means 5th graders aren't included in that, it's 6th through 8th grade.
Okay.
So that's why it says level B teams for 5th graders. If there is a B team available, then they have the opportunity to try out for that. Otherwise, each season does offer at least one sport that 5th graders would be included
Okay.
on.
So would it be possible just to put where it says baseball, softball, 6 through 8 or something, just so that it's
Just
clear?
Yeah. Yeah. I can honestly go through and put what grades in parentheses next to all of them if that's
Yeah, just, I
better,
mean,
easier.
the parents could be signing up
Yeah.
for other opportunities if they know it's not necessarily offered in their school.
Anything else? Okay. You're off the hook. All right. Now we're on the horizon.
I am out of state on vacation the 13th.
I am as well. Oh. Hmm. And you're both out the whole week?
I'm actually out for 2 weeks, but I'm back. The next day. If I get in late that night.
I'm only asking because these are up for a second reading, and so, yeah, it's still a quorum with 5 people, but.
I would love to push it out a day or 2. What do you got?
So. Wait, what do you want to do? The 14th or the 15th? Which won't help Jill, but would give us one more.
Jill, are you just out that week? Would you have opportunity to review the packet when it comes out on the 9th and just send us any concerns or feedback you have? Would that be sufficient for you?
Is the 20th too late?
20's too late to approve the handbooks. You know.
So I can do the 14th or 15th.
And I can also just provide feedback too.
Yeah, sure, make it work.
Yeah, I can do the 14th.
I can do the 14th.
I don't get vacation, so it doesn't matter.
14th.
Okay. In Canterbury. And, okay.
Make sure that's a Wednesday.
Yes.
What is farmers
Okay, so on the horizon, which is where we so for the 13th,
We have second readings on the handbooks,
Yeah.
P-card rebate, student activity account changes, and preliminary budget discussion.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I see. So September 10th, we meet with the Belmont town officials. I know we talked about bringing Canterbury in sooner. Where is that?
Canterbury is on the 8th, October 8th, because we're at CES.
Ah, perfect, thank you.
Okay. Anything else, Randy? Or anyone, but Randy really likes the horizon. I do. It's great.
I thought it was one pushing both of them, right? So she could have more idea on the budget.
We did talk about that. We talked about having them so we knew the select board.
So that's right, it was later, not earlier.
So we knew,
I thought we talked about having them earlier.
but we won't know the budget.
I think it'd be great to have that conversation during the preliminary budget discussion.
Perfect. Good idea.
Thank you. Give everyone's fun.
Okay. All right. Next up, volunteer list. There's one.
I'll make a motion that we.
Oh,
What?
go ahead.
Oh, I was adding, no, there's some stopping. I'll make a motion to accept the volunteer list as presented.
Discussion. All those in favor of the motion as presented do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. Up for second reading is IKA, the grading system. I believe the feedback from the first meeting, based on what I read, was to go back to what the School Board Association had. And that's what you did, Michael? Sorry. Yeah, I'm just confirming that all happened.
That's what this
Yes.
policy is based off of.
Motion to approve revised policy IKA as presented.
Second.
Discussion. So you know, we'll call the vote. All those in favor of the motion as presented do so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. We will recognize the resignation. And then public communication and correspondence. Thank you all for staying with us through this time at the late hour. So if anyone wants to make a comment, just spell your last name, where you're from, and just be aware the board may not engage in a discussion, which I didn't see last time, but we welcome your feedback or comments.
Hi.
Go ahead.
I'm Catherine Martino from Belmont. I did make some notes throughout, not a lot. Really, I actually just wanted to thank Greta for her input that all children should have the opportunity to shine. And I feel that this is a stark reminder that our kids are here to learn the material and not for anyone to excel because they were lucky to ace it the first time. Thank you for understanding that so much happens that affects our kids that is not always in their control. The other issue, I didn't hear a lot of suggestions from the board as far as like the lunch debt and the Chromebook debt. I just wanted to kind of put it out there that maybe there would be an opportunity for them to work off that debt. As an adult, when you have a debt, you pick up an extra shift, you do more work. Maybe that's something that we could find, something that's of value to the school, that the kids could stay after school and pick up trash or something so that they don't carry that debt. Just an idea.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Anything else?
No, that's all.
Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? Yeah.
Lisa Tucker, Belmont. I'm just going to piggyback on her with the Chromebook. You can buy that insurance for $20. So maybe the parent couldn't afford that $20 insurance, but maybe there's a way to go to the PTO at your school or some way to help some of these kids that might not have that money to get that insurance. Then that'll help on the Chromebook debt too, maybe.
The only piece is the insurance covers accidental damage. Some of these damages are not accidental. Unfortunately.
And that's what I figured, it's like community service.
Yeah.
Pick up trash. You trash your Chromebook, just some accountability as well.
Anything else? Yeah.
Tara Crotto, Belmont. I just kind of I'm sorry, what's your name again? Vanessa, sorry. She was talking about the tardiness and attendance. A lot of that I can resonate with because my son just graduated from Belmont and he could not get to school on time to save his life, no matter what we did. So, and it wasn't because he just could do it. And, no matter what we did, and we are not parents that do not toe the line with our kid. We do. But he drives and he would be 1 minute late and that counts as a tardiness, or he'd be 5 minutes late, and late is late. Even if we said, you need to get your butt out of bed. You are not going to have your car for a week. I mean, we took the car away for a week. And then 2 weeks later, he'd be late to school 3 times in that week. And we would go in the computer system and see it. So I echo what she says. I mean, but at the end of the school year, he ended up doing a 2.5 hour in-house school detention. So, I echo what she's saying. It's not something I think they can fix. So just Mark, so you're aware of that. They do everything they can, and I think we as parents do everything we can, but when they get to be 17, 18 years old, even if you take their car away, their electronics, their phone, they're still late. It's also a brain development issue as well, unfortunately, no matter what you do. What?
School starts early.
Yes, and teenagers do not function well. Technically, if you look at their development, their brain development, they really shouldn't, they should be sleeping in and staying up later. That's how their brain works developmentally. So getting them to school at 7 o'clock, 7:30 in the morning is actually a tall order. And I'm not trying to make excuses, it's biologically true. So I sympathize with you. And then the other thing, when I'm very grateful for Mr. Finch for coming up with this new grading system. It sounds much better. I'm just trying to give kudos to all the hard work that's being put in here, and improvement. And because I was thinking about my daughter and her math class, because she took an advanced math class and she got 2 grades for it in this past year. She got her regular grade and then she got her honors grade. So on her progress report, she had 2 math grades. And, I thought that was really odd. And she had to do an extra packet to get the honors grade for it. So I'm just wondering, and you can talk with me after, how that's going to work when you go to retro the grades in the system. Because there's 2 different grades for that. So that was a question I had that you can answer to me later. And then, yeah, I think that's it. And I just, communication. So when we're talking about communication about this new system that we're going to be using for grading, Google Classroom, I just want to echo my experience. And when my son came into the school system, it was never communicated to me as a new parent how to use Google Classroom, what to do with Google Classroom. Nothing about Empower. I mean, there were some emails that were sent out, but it was never communicated to me how that works. Like, what do you do? How do you use it? I didn't even know. I mean, it was like blind. Didn't even know it existed until another parent said, hey, you can go into Google Classroom. Oh, we have Google Classroom? I didn't even know it existed in the school system until another parent told me. So I think just to be mindful of parents that never had a student in the system, that when a new student comes into the elementary school or the middle school or the high school, that somebody, I don't know who it can be, but that somebody needs to communicate to the family, the student, this is how we do things here. Here's your new student packet. This is Alma, this is Google Classroom, this is whatever, because it was never communicated well. So I think that's just a point to take. That's it.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Sharon Hampton, Belmont. I appreciate all the discussion regarding the reassessment policy, but from a teacher perspective, I have to add that the more we do this for our kids, the more reliant they become on it, for a lot of them. And then most of the kids that do the reassessment are the kids that really do get the 3.5s, 3.8s, and want to go to the 4s. I'm not negating the fact that we should offer opportunities for kids to succeed. That's our goal. But I do know that it's a burnout thing when we do have multiple reassessments. It's like the whole concept of rolling grades. When does it end? When can I continue and not keep reassessing? With that, it's a mindset for the kids. Like she's talking about, Tara is talking about communicating with parents, but also with the kids. If they get the message that they can just reassess, what's the incentive to study the first time? Well, not the first time, but to get a good grade prior to an assessment. I also had a couple other questions. I asked Mr. Pope what he was doing as presenting, because I know I'm not supposed to talk in the midst of your discussion. I asked if parents are getting the same Alma updates that teachers are getting right now regarding some of the changes and ways to access different things. And I don't know if you are, as parents, getting those same things that the teachers are. And also in the summer, I know a lot of teachers that don't even open their email, so they may not be looking at those too. So there will be a learning curve with that as well for us. so that communication, that this is new. I do like the fact that Alma communicates with Google Classroom, so that's a plus, because Empower did not. And it was like entering multiple grades, and it's cumbersome for somebody. And if you don't go into it, like you were saying, that you don't enter a lot of grades in, every time it seemed like we entered it took 15 times more, and it was so easy to make a mistake, and whoops, the grades are gone. And it's happened to me and other teachers, and it's difficult, because you could do a shortcut, whatever from the past. I'm just saying there might be those shortcuts in the future that we're going to need some time. And I hope that we're given time as teachers to really spend that time on that, and not a lot of other meeting things. I appreciate the fact that Lori Cowan already sent out the state mandated trainings that we have to do for suicide prevention, cyber bullying, and all of that in advance, so we can do that now, so we can spend the time on Alma. But just from a teacher perspective, you have to know how difficult it is to reassess. I get that they should be given the opportunity. I just don't want to, for lack of better terms, I don't want those grade grubbers to say, oh, I can reassess, and to get a 4, when they're really at a good level. I want it to be an accurate reflection of what they understand, not constant revisions.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Next up is non-public.